Hey there, bookkeeping side hustle community. It is Kate. We are streaming live in May 2023. And today we're going to learn about this really awesome volunteer opportunity. Kind of titling it for accounting pros, but really it's for anybody who wants to serve their community. We're going to learn about what's called the Vita program. We're going to even get the acronym named. It's like Volunteer Tax Preparers is what this is. And so I want... the purpose of this interview is just to give you enough information so that you know if you want to go find out how you can do this in your community. I did this back in 2021 in Virginia Beach, and I might share a little of my story today, but our guests are going to share a lot of theirs. I wanted a chance to serve my community because of COVID. My volunteer role as a chaplain's volunteer in the jail got shut down. I was teaching personal finance stuff in the jail. And this was kind of, I thought, well, maybe it'll be sort of related. It wasn't related at all, but I loved it. And so I've been wanting to do this interview for like 2 or 3 years. And I'm so excited to have these two guests. This is a dream come true for me. And I hope it inspires listeners to serve their neighbors. This program's not going away. So even if you're listening to this like 5 years from now, it'll still be useful to you. So little admin, chime in on the chat. I will read your comments and your questions. If you have been a Vita volunteer, pump us up. Say what you loved about it. Let us help celebrate this opportunity as well. But be sure to ask your questions. Let us know where you're from and get the chat going if y'all don't mind. And we're going to get started. I want my panelists to introduce themselves. Just tell us your name, tell us your location, because Vita is a local program. So tell us where you're located and why you wanted to be a volunteer tax preparer. Megan, let's start with you.
Okay, I am Megan Tarnow. I am speaking to you from my attic in St. Paul, Minnesota. And even though I've been sort of in the bookkeeping accounting world for a very long time, hanging out with the folks on tax Twitter, which if you are doing any kind of tax or finance, it's a phenomenal community. But I felt like I had this imposter syndrome, right? Because I was hanging out with those people, but I don't do tax. And then and this will come up in a minute, I had an opportunity to do tax as a volunteer. And I thought that would be a great way to just learn some more from the inside.
Awesome. What about you, Chris?
I'm Chris Hahn. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm just here in my office. And the way I really got started with Vita was actually school. At school, they provided credit hours for this program. And at first, I had no idea what it was and went ahead and did it because I was going into tax anyways, or I was already doing taxes. So it was a great opportunity to kind of expand my knowledge and get a good volunteer experience as well.
So this leads us perfectly to our first question. You were like, I didn't know what it was, but I signed up. What is Vita? What in the world is this? Can you, Chris, can you tell us, what it is, any history about it that you think would be relevant for a listener?
Yeah, it's Vita, Volunteer Income Tax Assistant, Vita. And pretty much what it is, it's a federally run program from the IRS that allows families or individuals that make less than $60,000 a year to be able to come in, have people prepare their taxes for free. And so not having to deal with, H&R blocks or ultra tax and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a really good opportunity for someone to just come in who can't maybe afford that kind of service to be able to come in and get it for free and get all their taxes done for them, so they're not having to stress about it because taxes are sometimes stressful.
Sure.
So it's a great program to be able to do that and serve your community while doing that as well.
Yeah, there's so many different kinds of people who went, like, a widow whose spouse has always done the taxes, might need some help. Yeah. Incomes change once you retire. I know there's a lot of retirees that do it. I hope so. If y'all have any more questions about what Vita is, but now it's a volunteer income tax assistant, and it's run by the IRS, and it's all over the country. So let's switch to Megan. Megan, can you explain how to get started? How do you apply? This is like a rigorous program. It's not just sort of show up and bang a nail on something. There's a formal process to it. So how did you find out how to apply? How do you suggest others as best as possible? Do you have any suggestions for other folks who want to find it in their community?
Yeah, so it sounds like my experience was a little bit different than other people. I was reading an actual physical newspaper back in the fall.
Way to go.
And I know, crazy, because I'm just like, I need a little bit more in depth than I'm getting from social media. But local paper lists a column once a week of volunteer opportunities, and a local nonprofit happened to be listed as an opportunity to do this Vita tax preparation. And I'm like, that sounds cool. So I was able to go on their website and fill out the application form, and they got back to me, and we went through all the training, which we'll talk about later. But I know it can be hard to find a site, because even though it is a federally supported program with federal training, it is run on the ground by local organizations. So if you start with sort of Vita preparer opportunities near me in the Google, that should give you some places that you can go in your local community. And also things like Chris said that, for his site, you were just saying 60,000 was the top in income. For ours, I think that is set by the different sites. So for ours, it was 55,000 for a family, and I think $35,000 for an individual, but it just varied depending on every site has their own their own regulations around that.
Yeah, I know. So for the Virginia Beach site, AARP was the group that did it, there was people younger than the demographic for AARP, both volunteering and coming in for assistance. But that's just who happened to run it, and they used the library is where ours happened. And Chris, your story was that you got into it through school, so it was more of a kind of handed to you. You didn't have to hustle that hard to figure out how to apply, right?
Yeah, right. It's a course provided, and so I knew the professor who did it, and I needed another accounting hour, so I said, let's do it.
So I want to share for me, I had actually tried a full year before I got in, and I wasn't successful. I think I didn't try that hard. I just filled out a site on the IRS website, and that was not helpful. So what I ended up doing is, because our local library has had flyers for that tax season, I picked up a flyer and I told the librarian, I'm not leaving until you tell me who the human is that runs this. And I was able to get an email address for a real person who ran it, so I wasn't going through the IRS at that point. I was going through an individual, and I said, I would like to work for you. And he said, yeah, come on, our next meeting is such and such date. And that's how I found this. So I had to hunt, y'all. So don't be discouraged. If you really want to do it, you might have to go to the site. If you can find a site, just show up and say, can I volunteer? You'll have to wait a year to do it, but that would be one way to find a person to talk to. Megan, can you tell us what the training process was like? How well do you think it prepared you? How rigorous was it?
It was fairly intense, actually. So we had the opportunity of doing it virtually or in person. And my local nonprofit ran several, cohorts of training, right? Kind of over the fall. Mine was, oh my gosh, I want to say full days on Saturday from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. for somewhere. I want to say 4, maybe 6 weeks.
That sounds about right. My experience.
Yeah. And it was pretty intense, going over, and doing some real world examples and really walking through what's expected of a Vita volunteer, as well as understanding, the tax stuff.
Yeah. And there's an exam. I recall an exam that I took very early in the mornings and was very nervous about. And you have to get an 80, I think, to qualify, and you have a couple chances, but so it's not for the faint of heart. But there are non-tax prepare opportunities too, that if you had not passed one year and you want to shadow people that first year, you might be able to learn a little bit, but be an intake coordinator or a tech person. Is that y'all's experience too? There were other non-tax prepare roles as well?
For me, we only had our teacher, the tax preparer, and reviewer.
Oh, okay.
We're kind of a smaller operation, yeah.
And ours did have that, Kate. So we had some like intake people because the nonprofit I was volunteering with did not, like, tax prep was one of their services. They also did some financial literacy programs, and they could get them, and they were connected with a local bank. So they could like sign them up for bank accounts if they didn't have them. They could sign them up for, like, they can get them a debit card, like a prepaid, like a debit card. So like, you know, if you get, which was really useful for people who were unbanked, right? Which we did get several of at our site, like waiting for a check to come from the IRS or the state for your refund can take a really long time. But they, because they were partnering with a local bank, they could get them a debit card kind of on the spot so that they could have the refund flow directly to that debit card.
That's amazing. That's life-changing.
Yeah, for a lot of people it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And they also had a program where, like, if they put part of it into savings, like even $50, they were entered into a drawing to get an extra 100 deposited into their savings account. So it was cool.
So yeah, y'all, if y'all have questions as we're going, type them in the chat. I'm going to ask Chris, just kind of what was the work like? What was it like serving clients? How much of a time commitment was it? Maybe just sort of like a typical day in the life of a Vita volunteer from your experience.
Yeah, so like Megan was saying, initially, whenever you were doing the exams, it's pretty time continuous trying to pass those exams and learning the information. But after that, for me personally, I would go in once a week, as in like it would be my class time. But I was there on Saturdays from around 12, between 12 and 5, but we would probably leave before 4, depending on how many people we had coming in. So I would get in there and start preparing for clients. And sometimes, since I was in the tax world already, my professor was allowing me to review other people's input as well. So we were able to kind of speed up the process at sometimes if we were running behind on appointments. So that was really cool. But past that, it was just serving the clients and making sure all their stuff is entered in correctly and that they're getting that refund that they're hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
Were you preparing live while they were there? Because I know that's how Vita used to work, but then with COVID, it was a drop off and then they had to return. How was your site working that?
Yeah, so mine was post COVID, and so we were still doing it in person. But I remember my professor telling me whenever they did it during COVID that there was, they would hand the documents to us, and then they would prepare it and then end up giving it back to them once they were done. So I don't know if that was similar to how you guys had heard or did in 2020.
What was yours, Megan?
So this was my first year in 2022, and it was, they sat down across the table from you and were right there while you were doing their taxes, and then they would have to go like sit in the hallway while the tax form was reviewed. And I think that's important for people to know if they haven't done this before. Yeah. It's like, this was not just totally in the hands of me who had zero experience. Everything, I was surrounded by, we probably had 4 preparers at my site during my shift, and also reviewers. So no tax went out without being reviewed by someone with a whole lot more experience, which was also a great way to learn, right? Because they come bring your mistakes back to you, explain to you why something had to be fixed. And so you get better at it with that feedback.
Oh, for sure. I had tons of mistakes.
But at least you're not going without a net, right? Exactly. They are not just putting these poor people's future completely in the hands of a newbie, right? There's some guardrails.
Yeah, especially in my experience being a student, it was a bunch of 22 to 25-year-olds doing your taxes, and they're like, but there were some older people who had more experience and was able to help out and review, and so
that's I think that's encouraging, and there's like a community that can be built. Like, we need to be like, society is best when like the older or learning from the wiser, and there's no better way to learn. Like, no matter how many tests we're going to take, until you're sitting there doing a return and getting the retirement contribution messed up, and then having someone say, no, here's how it really was supposed to be. That's what's going to make it stick. Because you can pass a test. Like, even after you pass the test, you're still going to feel like, I shouldn't be preparing anyone's taxes. So it's good that there's a team. It's very much a team. Like our group went out for like a party after the tax season was over. Like we had like they tried to make it like a camaraderie. So Megan, could you tell us who would be good at this? Who's a great candidate for being a Vita volunteer? What skill set do you need? Any tips for someone who's listening about whether maybe they should continue to pursue trying to figure out if they can do this?
I mean, I think it's a great fit for anyone who is, I mean, you got to be pretty detail oriented. You have to have, you know, a logical mind and sort of be able to follow the decision tree of how to figure out, you know, tax status. I think is a really challenging thing, actually. Are you head of household? Are you married? And then like all of that can be a little complex. A willingness to learn, and also you can't be afraid of technology, right? Because you are using a somewhat clunky software to prepare that. But just someone who cares about people and wants to give back, I think, would be a good fit.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add for that one, Chris?
No, I think she nailed it on the head right there. So.
All right, perfect. Now I'm going to ask both of you. We're getting to the end, folks. So if y'all have questions, chime in now, because I'm going to ask both of you to just share a story, a personal story. Obviously, keep information private, but just one of your favorite experiences, the most meaningful experiences. Chris, can we start with you? What just touched your heart this year?
So I was actually helping this lady. She had just a ton of gambling W-2 stuff, just entering it all in. And, you know, we just started talking about life and it wasn't even about taxes. Like I would enter in her stuff and then we would just talk about her family or what's going on in her life and what's going on in my life. So it's really, I think taxes can sometimes be this daunting experience for a lot of people. And it's a great opportunity just to sit there and talk to them during it so we can ease their mind or just sit there and help them out. And so I thought that was a great experience just to being able to talk to someone in the midst of handling their money or their refund and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a great experience for me just to get to interact with clients personally.
Fantastic. Megan, what about you?
Oh man, it's like, I think there's two that really like come to mind. And one was this immigrant family who the dad had been like a top mechanic working with the American forces in Afghanistan. And when we left, like, because he was like a top mechanic, apparently his picture was in all the different garages as sort of the top of the hierarchy. So the Taliban decided he was a very important person, right? And so like they were hunting for him and like had ambushed a car he was in and he survived that. And but anyway, he was able to get his entire family out. And it's like he had worked with the US forces as a mechanic like early on and had then been able to like gone back to school and become a pharmacist. And he and his brother had bought this property where they were planning to build a school and educate, you know, young people. And then when they had to flee, they left with nothing. Like he and his family of 5, right? And they brought all of them to the Vita site to get their taxes done. And, you know, to be able to like see how hard they were working to make a life for themselves in the US and to be able to, you know, help them get that refund, right? Because that really makes a huge difference for a lot of people. And then there's parts of things we do that are refundable credit, right? So you don't get that. You can do all the planning in the world, but that part still comes back to you when you file your taxes.
Right.
Did you want to share the second story?
The second story is like kind of a more depressing one. It was like this kid who his mom had her taxes done at this Vita site for several years, and he was maybe 18, 19 in college, right? And part of the questionnaire was, do you have any, you know, did you get were you paid for other stuff in cash? And he goes, yeah, because I was working with, he was a ref for a bunch of different soccer associations, and they would pay him cash on the field. But they also said, they all tracked it really carefully, so it stayed below the limit. I'm like, dude, that limit that protects them from having to send you a 1099, but it doesn't mean it's not taxable income. And it's like, and once I know about it, I can't not know about it.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that got me, because you find out there's a bunch of organizations, right? There's folks saying people are independent contractors, but they're controlling every aspect of their job. So the employer doesn't have to pay the tax side, right? And so that was really frustrating to me, and I could see that, the impact on the person for that decision the people they'd been working for had made.
Yeah.
And so that part got me.
Well, that person's educated more now, and so he can go to his, like, at least maybe he can set aside taxes next year, or he can go to those people and say, hey, like, pay me what I'm worth, instead of trying to keep under certain, there's a value in the knowledge now, because he's getting professional help instead of trying to do it on his own.
Yeah. Well, just the frustration too. It's like, okay, like, here's a contract. Like, if you can't sub somebody in for you at your own discretion, you're not a contractor.
Yeah.
And so people getting out of employment taxes on that part kind of.
Yeah. I had a story of a family that I didn't know anything about this, but blind people have some special tax allowance, like special treatment in the tax code. And there was a man, and his wife came in, and he was blind, and he was doing his best to provide for his family. And but he was just like really focused on, like, well, there's been other people who didn't know that, like, blind people have these special allowances. So that's what I really want to know. And I ended up making sure I got extra help to make sure we helped him. But he was really concerned about that, because he's like, it was just awesome. He and his wife sitting there and seeing how like wonderful he was caring for his family. And he just needed a little extra help with his taxes. So I got a couple questions in the chat. Megan, you might know this one. Would this help a bookkeeper be a better bookkeeper?
Yes.
Okay, how
it
so?
100% would. And I would say things like, that was really fascinating to me, like seeing it from the other side, right? So understanding how, like, if you're a bookkeeper for a sole prop or a small corporation, like, are you doing things right on your side? And also the importance of, like, if you're solo, right, you need to be keeping your receipts. You have to have documentation. You have to be able to back things up, because for better or for worse, when the IRS comes to audit, right, they often hit the low-hanging fruit. Like, we can go for the folks who are claiming, earned income tax credits, and make sure they really deserve that, because that person's probably not hiring a lawyer to fight them every inch of the way. So yeah, I think so for sure.
For me, y'all, because I came at this from the bookkeeping side and wanted to, like, I felt like I was able to, like, my lingo, like, skyrocketed. Like, I was able to just talk about taxes better and more comfortably, because the training is pretty rigorous. Like, it's kind of a little more it's way more expansive than what I ended up seeing. Like, they train you on a lot of different scenarios, and I didn't hit them all in my hours that I worked. But because of that training, you're just getting hit with like I didn't even know there was a word called head of household. And, like, so just to be able to, like, sound like I know what I'm talking about a little bit more. And I still don't, like, advise on taxes, but I'm like, I know where to start looking, I guess, or where to advise, or where to say, hey, this is, whoa, red light. You need a tax professional to intervene. So that's how I thought it helped me. It doesn't help me on the day-to-day, but it helps me conceptually be a better bookkeeper. So, Chris, can you answer this one? What software does Vita use? Is it proprietary, or is it popular for other, like, in other accounting careers?
If I remember correctly, it was provided by the IRS. It's a certain service that they use. So I don't know if other people use it. I didn't really ask my teacher for that information, but from what I understood, it was provided by the IRS, a certain software that was able to use and prepare.
Do you remember the name of it?
Used TaxSlayer. I thought my site used TaxSlayer, but I think so. TaxSlayer obviously must have, like, a contract with the government to be the provider.
I think that's what it was. And TaxSlayer, I have never used TaxSlayer outside of Vita. So I'm not sure if I'm sure they probably provide other services like that to.
I think it's a retail tax software as well, but they
Okay.
have a
I
special
wasn't
contract
sure on
with
that.
the government to be used on the Vita sites.
Okay.
If you're asking because you're thinking like, oh, could I start doing tax preparation? I don't think this would be a commercial tax. Like you wouldn't want to build a tax business on Tax Slayer. I don't think. I've never heard.
I think people do. It is a,
really?
It's a retail thing as well. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, would it be a way to like, is it a good tech stack to pick? Like if you're going to pick your software to start doing other people's tax returns, I've never heard of
I don't think it syncs with anything. I think it's all very like manual, but I don't know enough about, general tax prep, but I think a lot of them are fairly manual actually for the input, right?
Yeah, probably. But that's the answer to the question. Tax Slayer. So you can investigate more if you want to ask on Tax Twitter if anyone has built their practice on, with Tax Slayer as their preparer tech option. Ask that. We don't. The three of us don't run our own tax businesses yet. Maybe Chris will one day.
Let's see.
I gotta admit, I thought about that when I was doing it though, because I was like, okay, if everything else goes south in my life, I could probably go and get a job at H&R Block now.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have the testing is so rigorous. Like you do have to learn a lot. You can't fake that test because you don't get to do the program if you don't pass your tests. And I think there was at least 2. Was there more than that? How many tests were there?
I mean, there was like a basic level, and then there's an advanced level, right? So you can stop like I did at the basic.
Okay.
For the first year round.
All right. Hey, y'all, I'm looking at the time. I want to kind of keep this short because, again, this was just to tickle people's fancy about this. We got a lot of great chat here. Matthew saying that he's so glad to be here. He loved this topic. Great information. Thank you so much. I had no idea this existed. I'm going to seriously consider it. So thanks to all of y'all who chimed in. And to our guests, Megan and Chris, y'all were the real shining stars. Again, this is a dream come true for me because I want this information to be out there because I think more people would do it if they knew about it. And I would say the IRS is probably not known for its like marketing campaigns. So that's why it's not necessarily well known. And so now we're gonna get it out there and get more folks to serve their neighbors in this way. It's really cool because it's a neighbor, like it's local guys, and that's something that's makes my heart sing about that. So
absolutely.
I think it's so cool that like many of the people at my site had been doing it for years.
Oh yes.
Years and years and years. And that tells you something about what a positive experience it is. Like they come back year after year after year.
Yeah.
That's the same with my site too. Definitely very senior people. And it's kind of cool, like especially if you've done it for years and years and years, you're probably on the older side of life. And it's a nice gig because it's just tax season. So if you want to like have summers off with grandkids or, a big cruising season and like something like that, it's really just the tax season. Minus, getting your refresher training on a couple Saturdays, but it's a nice time commitment too, with real impact behind it. So, all right, I'm going to wrap us up. I'm saying sayonara to everyone. Adios, all the goodbyes. Megan and Chris, thank you. Thanks for all of y'all who watched live, and I'm very excited that this is going to be out there in the world forever now. So if you're watching after the fact, give this video a thumbs up. Let us know if you have any questions. You can ask questions below still, and I'll try to answer them. And let us know if you serve. Come back and say, hey, I got in, and share your stories. Maybe we can do a reprise with some other folks and get even more stories out there to get more people volunteering. So, all right, I'm signing off. Bye, everyone.